The New York Islanders have wrapped up their major business for the offseason. We'll talk about what a difference a year makes and the impact Matthew Darche has had on this franchise in just a few months. All that and more next on today's Locked On Islanders podcast.
Your Locked On Islanders, your daily podcast on the New York Islanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to the Monday edition of the Locked On Islanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. I'm Gil Martin. I've been covering the New York Islanders for almost 2 decades, and I wrote the book Ice Wars on the history of the Islanders' rivalry with the Rangers from 1972 to the modern era. So glad you could join us today and talk a little Islanders hockey. We've got a lot to discuss. We're going to talk about the difference that Matthew Darche has made on the New York Islanders in just a few months. Some of the things that have changed now that he's in charge instead of Lou Lamarello. We'll talk about the agreement that the Islanders reached with Maxim Ciplakov, and we'll complete our scouting of the 2025 Islanders draft picks with first overall pick Matthew Schaefer. Got to start with the Darche difference, and it is without a doubt something that has benefited the New York Islanders overall, because after the Islanders announced that they had reached an agreement with Maxim Ciplakov on a 2-year deal, there was definitely a different feeling here than there was a year ago. And I'll take you back, okay? You look at where this team was last fall or last summer. At the beginning of the season last year, because of cap mismanagement by Lou Lamarello, the Islanders could not even sign 23 players to the NHL roster. They didn't have the cap space. And they had Matt Martin on a PTO. They're trying to do all these little juggling moves, but ultimately, the team just didn't have enough cap space to really function. They didn't have much in the way of prospects in the pool. And again, you had an aging roster that did not have a particularly bright future outlook. Maybe they could contend for a wild card spot or one of the last playoff spots in the East, but you didn't have a lot of hope for the future. And the present was, again, in the muddy middle at best. The Islanders, after signing Ciplakov, now have 23 players under contract, and they're still under the salary cap by a couple of $1 million. Now, that could change depending on injuries, what happens with Semyon Varlamov, whether they have to add David Rittich or Marcus Hogberg to the roster. There's still some variables involved. But the fact that we saw shorter-term deals handed out by Matthew Darche, to me, is a big deal. Jonathan Drouin, you could like or dislike the signing, but you want to hear the good part? It's a 2-year deal. 2 years. If it doesn't work out, either you send him to the minors, cut him, trade him, whatever you need to do, but worst case scenario is he's gone after the 26-27 season. Even if you can't move him, there's no long-term commitment. Maxim Ciplakov, bridge deal. Prove it. A prove-it deal. You wouldn't see many prove-it deals in the past under Lou Lamarello. And the beautiful thing about a 2-year prove-it deal for Maxim Ciplakov, a 1-year prove-it deal for Maxim Shabanov, a 2-year deal for Jonathan Drouin. What those kind of moves do for your organization is it creates urgency and accountability, something the team lacked at times under Lou Lamarello, where you were giving away long-term contracts for a lot of money with no trade clauses or partial no trade clauses. And when you have a 7-year deal, there is a sense of security that human nature, I'm not trying to knock these players or say they don't care, because I'm not saying that. But it is human nature that most people, when they have the security of a 7-year contract under their belts, they are not going to act as urgently than if there's a 1 or 2-year contract, and they know that if they don't play well, they may not make as much money, or they may blow a chance to make a lot more money in the future. Look, Tsyplakov had a solid rookie season, but he is not a proven middle six NHL player yet. You give him that 2-year deal, and he needs to work. He needs to prove himself again. Same thing with Jonathan Drouin. Accountability is one big benefit to what Matthew Darche is doing. When you then add the improved prospect pipeline, and yes, a lot of these guys are 2 or 3 years away from being NHL ready. But as the Cole Yzermans, the Danny Nelsons, the Matthew Schaefers, the Victor Eklunds of the world start to get closer to NHL ready, start to be NHL ready, all of a sudden you're putting pressure on the players on your roster who know that their roster spot could be up for grabs if they don't play well. You didn't have enough of that in the past under Lou Lamarello. So what did we learn? Number one, Matthew Darche, not afraid to go short term with some of these players. Lou Lamarello, more likely to go long term with more job security. I think the Islanders are better off keeping some of these players a little hungrier. Second of all, under Matthew Darche, what are we seeing? We are seeing players who do clearly fit what he's trying to accomplish, like Alexander Romanov getting rewarded with security and a long-term deal. Players who do not necessarily fit the blueprint as well, or who have yet to prove themselves, little short-term deal. It gives the players, again, more incentive. You want to earn that long-term deal? It's doable. This is what you need to do to get there. Overall, this makes sense. And then having a little bit of a cushion under the cap, where a year ago you couldn't even fill out a roster. And the fact that Matthew Darche set limits and stuck to them, to me, is also very encouraging. How many times over the last 4 or 5 years have we heard Lou Lamarello say something along the lines of, hey, I paid the guy too much money and gave him too much term, but that's the way it is. Well, it doesn't have to be. And what Matthew Darche did, and I'll use Noah Dobson as the prime example, basically, he said, okay, this is what the player is worth. The player is asking for significantly more money than what I'm comfortable paying him. Obviously, I think there was a part of the negotiations where Noah Dobson either wanted out, or he may not have said, I want out, but his actions demonstrated that he was not averse to being moved if the Islanders wouldn't give him the money he was asking for. Under Lou Lamarello, most likely you pay him the $10 million a year. 8 years, no trade clause, and all that. But Matthew Darche said, you know what? He's not worth $10 million a year. I am not going to pay him all that money because it doesn't really work with what we're trying to do. I will move him rather than pay him. And think about this. And I understand that Dobson has some great skills that could have helped this team in the short run. But if you would have signed Dobson, you either would have had to have traded Alexander Romanov, and even if you traded Romanov, you don't have enough cap space for Shabanov. You don't have enough cap space probably for Drouin, and you probably would have to have traded away another player in order to make enough room to fit Noah Dobson under your cap. And then again, you're back up against the cap, maybe not having a 23-player roster. The ramifications are, it's like ripples in a pool. The effect just keeps getting felt over the long run, and the circles just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So I think with Matthew Darche, there are limits. There is more accountability, and there is more hope for the future, more incentive for the players on the roster, and I think less security for some of these players who maybe need that incentive in order to take their game to the next level. So we'll see how this all plays out. We're obviously very early in the Darche era, but I see smart moves, things that will help the team in the long run. I'm not worried about the short run as much. This is a retool. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. This is a retool. So let the retool work itself out. Let's try to be relatively competitive this year, but over the long run, let's try to see what this team can do to try to become that consistent contender that Matthew Darche spoke about in his introductory press conference, where for 8, 10, 11 years, you're one of the top 7 or 8 teams in the league, and you've got a chance to win the Stanley Cup, a realistic chance to win the Stanley Cup every year. All right, we have got more to get to on today's show. We will talk about the deal Maxim Ciplakov signed on Friday with the New York Islanders. Plus, we'll have our scouting report on Matthew Schaefer. How do these two players impact the Islanders? We'll break it all down for you. We've got that and more coming up on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? Well, with Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. I love the fact that if you are sharing an account with your significant other, you have complete access and accountability for both of you. It makes keeping you on the same page a lot easier. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. So the Islanders reach a deal with Maxim Ciplakov. They announced it Friday afternoon. No arbitration, which is definitely a good thing. Everydayers, you'll remember we talked about sometimes arbitration can really mess things up. Because you go into the hearing, the player is in the hearing room with the agent. Things are said as to why the player isn't worth the money that they're asking for. And all of a sudden, some bad feelings develop between the organizations, the front office, and the player, or maybe also the player's agent. And we don't want to see that. So the Islanders end up reaching a deal with Maxim Ciplakov, 2 years at an AAV of $2.25 million per year. Again, getting back to the difference, supposedly Ciplakov and Lou Lamarello, according to published reports, were close to a deal at $3 million a year. This, I think, makes more sense. You look at the numbers that Maxim Ciplakov put up. They were nice, they were solid, but they weren't spectacular. Ciplakov had 10 goals and 35 points in 77 games. He was a +4 on a team that struggled, took a few too many penalties, even he admitted that, but, you know, he was a physical player. 140 hits, which tied him for 4th on the Islanders. Not bad for, a guy who didn't play major minutes for the team. And, he was a guy who I think can and will fit the Islanders' style that Patrick Roy and Matthew Darche want their players to play. He is willing to go to the net. He is willing to get into those dirty areas. He's willing to be physical. He'll play the game the way the Islanders want him to play. Memo to Pierre Engvall, you got to do not the same exact thing as Maxim Ciplakov, but you got to play the way Roy and Darche and the organization want you to play if you want to have a chance of making the lineup. And I think this deal with Ciplakov is a win-win because it is a 2-year deal that gives Maxim Ciplakov a little bit of a cushion, a little bit of security, but it's still a prove-it deal. So Ciplakov, if he takes the next step in his development this offseason, if he can get, let's say, to 20 goals and 45 points, just putting those numbers out there, I think that those are realistic numbers under the circumstances. All of a sudden, 2.25 million AAV in a rising cap situation is a good deal for Maxim Ciplakov. The Islanders will benefit. They will keep Sippy hungry because he knows he's got to play well to earn that next big contract. And from Ciplakov's standpoint, he's not getting tied down long-term. He's giving away one potential season of unrestricted free agency, but at the same time, he's staying with the team he knows, the system he has been playing under in the NHL. He is staying on a team with a lot of fellow Russians in a part of the United States where there is a large Russian-speaking community nearby. And I think all of these things, that's a quality of life issue that I think works in Maxim Ciplakov's favor. And he's playing for a team where there are jobs to be had, where I think in a year or even by the end of this year, if he plays well, if he gets to that 20 goal mark, 45 points, he can be in the top 6. He could be a second line player for the New York Islanders. He can be on the second power play unit for the New York Islanders to maximize his opportunities to get more ice time, to have a bigger role on this team. And that is something that Ciplakov needs. If he were to go to the Edmonton Oilers or to the Florida Panthers, he's a 4th line guy, 3rd line at best, and not going to see a lot of ice time, not going to get the power play time, not going to have as many opportunities. But on a retooling team like the Islanders, it's there for him. And, if you think about it, Cal Ritchie is the next prospect up, but you've got guys like Anders Lee and J.G. Pajot and Casey Cizikas, who are Pierre Engvall, guys who may not be here long-term or who are starting to slow down, let's say, who may be in the back 9 of their careers. So there is an opportunity for Maxim Ciplakov to step up, take on a bigger role, and prove to the Islanders or to the other 31 teams in the National Hockey League that he can play a bigger role. And that means more productivity. And that means in 2 years, more money for Ciplakov, whether it's with the Islanders or another team via trade, via free agency, whatever the case may be. So I think this is a win-win. I think it's a fair deal. It helps the team. It benefits the player as well. And look, just because it's great on paper or bad on paper doesn't mean it's definitely going to work or not work. Ciplakov needs to stay healthy. He needs to improve. If we still get the same 10 goals and 35 points from Ciplakov again this year, the deal is average. If we get less than that, or if he, heaven forbid, gets injured, it's not a great deal because you're not going to get the productivity. So I think it's fair for both sides. I think there are more benefits than drawbacks to this deal. And now it's up to Maxim Ciplakov to make it work. And, tying it all in with what we said about in our first segment about the Darche difference, it was too early to lock up Maxim Ciplakov for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. Again, keep them hungry, keep them working hard, give them the opportunity to succeed. And I think this is a win-win for player and for team. We've got more to get to on today's show. We'll talk about Matthew Schaefer as we conclude our player-by-player review and scouting report on every Islanders draft pick from this year to first pick overall. Lots to talk about there. And for our Islanders birthday of the day, a legacy Islander whose father also played for the team and who the Islanders should have drafted but didn't. We'll talk about his impact on the team and a lot more coming up on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. So as everydayers know, we've been doing scouting reports and deep dives on all of the Islanders 2025 draft picks. This is the last one, folks. Matthew Schaefer, first round, first pick overall. And I think that, his future is so bright. He is 17 still, won't turn 18 until September 5th. A native of Stony Creek, Ontario, 6'2", 183 pounds. Yeah, only played 17 games in the OHL in juniors last year for Erie. 7 goals, 22 points, and a plus 21 in those 17 games. And look, obviously, more to do, right? More to do. But, he's got to put on a little weight. He's got to adjust to playing against bigger, faster, stronger opponents. But the thing I think that stands out the most, and we saw this in development camp, this kid can skate. He's a good passer. He's creative. He's a playmaker. He's got a good shot. But, man, what he can do on his skates is impressive. And, he not only skates well, but he uses that ability to skate to set up his teammates, to create plays, he's responsible defensively, and he's a competitor. And I think, again, we talked about the Darche difference. He is looking, and he has said he wants players who are competitors. Well, that is something that Matthew Schaefer is going to bring to the table. The effort on every shift, not taking a shift off. Here's a kid who's already been through a lot in his life, and yet, you get the feeling that he is just scratching the surface. He's a mature kid for his age. And the scouting report, you look it over, everything he does is above NHL average or better. And the projection, according to The Athletic, is NHL star, first pair, number one defenseman. One player they compared him to, Jake Sanderson. But it really is something that, yeah, it may take 2 or 3 years for him to get there. But once he does, the Islanders have not, the last really dominant star potential defenseman that the New York Islanders had on their roster, and I think he was kind of a half a step below star power, but the last really good offensive defenseman this team had, who was a clear-cut number one guy and a leader, you got to go back to Mark Streit. So you're going back, a decade or more, and Streit, like I said, not a star player, but a very good player. Schaefer has the potential to be that number one all-star caliber guy that this team really, really hasn't had. And again, I don't expect him to be dominant in year one. He'll be probably on the third pair, probably on the second power play unit. He'll give you 15, 17 minutes a game on average, but watch the productivity, watch him mature and grow into the game at the NHL level over the course of the season if he stays on the team all year long. I personally would rather he spend 1 year playing in college. He doesn't want to do that, and we'll see whether or not he sticks with the Islanders for more than the 9 games they can play him at before they have to send him back to juniors, or this counts as year one of his entry-level contract. So we are looking forward to seeing Matthew Schaefer, but boy, the potential for him to be a long-term solution for the Islanders on the blue line is there. Now he has to go out and make it a reality. It'll take a little time, but I can't wait to watch him play. Time now for our Islanders birthday of the day, and Sunday was today is the 41st birthday of former Islanders winger Zach Parise, the Minneapolis native. Spent 2 years at the University of North Dakota, first-round pick of the Devils back in 2003. His father, J.P. Parise, a big part of the Islanders in the mid to late 70s. Everybody thought the Islanders should have drafted Parise. They passed on him. He went to the Devils, became a regular 30-goal guy, one season with 45 goals, then played for the Wild, joined the Islanders for the 2021-22 season, spent 2 years on the island, 21 goals in his second season with the team, and then finished his career with the Avalanche in 2023-2024. Played in 1,254 games, 434 goals, 889 points, 444 penalty minutes, add 39 goals and 83 points in 122 playoff games. Never did win a cup, but boy, was he a leader, a steady, strong, top 6 player, and someone who I wish would have been a New York Islander for longer. One of his better games with the Isles, how about November 26th, 2022, Islanders hosting the Flyers at the UBS Arena, and in this game, it's Felix Sandstrom in goal for Philly, Semyon Varlamov, the goalie for the New York Islanders. And in this game, our Islanders' birthday of the day, Zach Parise in the second period. Isles down 2-1. Parise gets a power play goal with Ivan Provorov in the box. Assist to Ryan Pollock. Game is tied 2-2. And then with the Islanders up 4-2 and back on the power play midway through the third period, Parise pots his second power play goal of the period. Josh Bailey and Ryan Pollock with the assists. Islanders go on to beat the Flyers 5-2. Zach Parise, 2 goals in this game. They both came on the power play, and he led the Islanders with 6 shots on goal in 16 minutes and 40 seconds of action. Zach Parise, an Islanders legacy and a player who probably should have been with the team longer, is our Islanders' birthday of the day. Thank you for making Locked On Islanders your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NHL podcast. There is no off season. We're bringing you the daily league-wide stories that matter most with the local coverage you love from Locked On. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you have a question, a comment, maybe a topic you'd like us to discuss on a future episode, send us an email to lockedonislanders@gmail.com. If you leave your first name and where you're from, we're happy to mention you on the show when we talk about whatever's on your mind. We're going to try to do a mailbag segment later on in the week, so get those mailbag questions in. And it is always great to talk a little Islanders hockey with you anytime. Follow the show on X at Locked On Isles. Follow me, Gil Martin, on X at Ice Wars, NYR, VSNYI. We'll keep you up to date on all things Islanders throughout this offseason and all year long. Everydayers, we're back on Wednesday. We'll give you the latest Islanders news, notes, and happenings. And, wow, can't believe we are getting closer and closer to training camp. It's about 6 weeks away, so the offseason moving very quickly. Until then, have a great day, everybody. Stay safe, and of course, let's go Islanders.